Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. I'm Lex Frieden. I'm your host for the program. I'm a professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, and I direct the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at TIRR Memorial Hermann. Today we have a very special program on Focus on Abilities. I hope you will be interested in this program. I believe you will, and I want you to tune in just a second to watch Focus on Abilities. Watching HTV in Houston. This is the Focus on Abilities program, and I'm Lex Frieden. Today we have a person who's been on the show before, but kept you waiting on the next one, and her name is Lourdes Cuéllar. Lou, thank you for being our guest today.
My pleasure.
Now, we have had the opportunity to visit before. You're a pharmacist by training and a mentor by nature, and you also directed most of the services in the TIRR hospital for a number of years before you recently retired. 45 years at one institution. Most of you probably can't even imagine how it would be to work for the same employer through your career. Did you work anywhere? Did you come here right out of high school?
No, I wish that would. What can I say? It's just a place that I love. I love to work here, and I just love the atmosphere, love the culture. I love the camaraderie. I love the respect that all the professions have for one another, for their skills and training and abilities. It's very collegial, and it benefits the patients because of that. It's a culture and a practice that is now more popular. Probably in the last 20 years, it's become more the type of teamwork that is now seen in many more hospitals.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, first, TIRR has never been a big place. When you came here, there were probably 60 or 70 hospital beds that were active.
That is correct.
We've never had more than about 110 or 120 that were licensed by the state, usually about 100 patients in recent years. And these are all people who have exceptional circumstances, and they are exceptional or they wouldn't be in this hospital. They'd be in a big 1,000-bed hospital somewhere else in the medical center or somewhere else in the world. But people from all over the world come here and make up those 100 patients that are here at any given time. People from all over the United States, because of that exceptional system of care that we have here. Few, even the biggest hospitals, have as many specialists or people who are exceptionally trained as we do in this small facility. And some of those doctors obviously practice in more than one hospital, but it is a unique kind of a system for people. Again, the patient population are people who could not be served well anywhere else. People with traumatic spinal cord injuries, and now even in recent years, people with very complex cancers that affect their physical ability, people with traumatic brain injuries, and I don't know if you who are watching understand or not, but it takes a different kind of doctor to treat somebody with a brain injury than somebody with a spinal cord injury, and that's one thing that when TIRR was founded, 1959, it was founded by Dr. William A. Spencer, who was brought here by the powers that be in Houston, the people who were organizing the medical center at that time. There was only one facility in the medical center. The Hermann Hospital was not actually a part of the medical center. It was already established, but the medical center was the rest of the land around here, which Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think, donated, and it was supposed to be a place for hospitals, but there were none. Baylor College of Medicine was the only facility on the
campus.
On the campus, yeah. When Bill Spencer designed and got permission from the medical center trustees to build TIRR here.
I think what I think it's very important for people to recognize and understand that Dr. Bill Spencer was a pediatrician. And when he first came here, it was because of the polio epidemic. And as the story goes, he was just so taken by the challenges and the disabling effects of the disease that he turned this hospital into a rehabilitation hospital.
Well, and Dr. Spencer, because he was a pediatrician, could help people who had paralysis from the polio understand what was going on and could help the other physicians know how to treat them. Because like children, when the polio affected their ability to speak or their ability to feel, have sensation, the children couldn't explain where it hurt. Neither could the people with polio and that paralysis. And Spencer was intuitive like that. And the other thing that Spencer did, which was at that time unique, and to some extent still is today, is he came to the conclusion that one doctor cannot deal with all these problems. And we need to have specialists that are, a team of clinicians. Not the other thing that he did unique was he realized the doctor is not the king of the planet here. He may, study Walk on Water 101, but that doctor's got to depend on the nurses, got to depend on the social workers, the therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapist, and a litany, including pharmacy. And there weren't any other places in the world at that time where those specialists and experts were working together as a team. Now they, even now they call on other specialists, but they do it on email or notes.
They come in
and
on
charts.
consults, yes.
Exactly, but they're not working together, all committed to the care and wellness of that one patient. So that was exceptional. Spencer did that.
And he was an exceptional man, brilliant man as well. And he was, he cared not only about his patients, he cared about the people who worked in this hospital. I have a very touching story that I remember. He loved the classical music, classics. He loved the symphony. And I remember one time talking to him in the hallway and was telling him I wanted to buy a good sound system, a good record system, which people would know today.
You hit his sweet spot there.
And he told me exactly where to go, what to look for, the brands I should listen to, and I picked out one that was very reasonable, and I have it to this day. It's just a wonderful system.
Yeah.
So he was not only a physician, but he was just really a mentor, a friend.
That was another aspect of it. He understood the issue of whole person, not just the bones that were broken or
very
the neck.
holistic medicine.
Exactly, holistic medicine, dealing with the person's thought process, relationship to the community, and so on. Another aspect of TIRR, which is unique, and you talked before when we had the chance to visit, about drawing on the house on the board and coming up with the concept of medical home. I remember one of those meetings where Dr. Spencer drew a line across the board, and it became the continuum. Person gets injured or gets sick, they go first to the emergency room and then to the rehab center, and then they go back to the community, and the end of the line was much longer than the short period of time they were in the hospital. He always said that. A short period of your life, even given the most severe consequences or the most severe injury or the most severe illness, the recovery from that, even though it may take more than a year, is a relatively short period of your life. You've got to live out here, this long continuum. And that's why TIRR began to provide community-based services as well. We don't do enough of that today. Nobody does. And yet TIRR had the vision. It simply hasn't been met yet.
Very early on, TIRR had the vision. I also wanted to mention that, part of we still saw polio patients for many years, and I always remember a gentleman, because it was very common for us to see, have the iron lungs here for those patients, but I always remember a gentleman who came in, and he actually had made his own iron lung with using wash tubs, and he was an engineer, and whenever he came into the hospital, Here he came with his own homemade.
Well, I mean, it was lifetime care.
Absolutely.
People felt like TIRR was home, and they'd come back to visit home. Do you know, Lou, that the second patient ever to come here, and not here, but to the hospital that preceded TIRR, where the patients came when they first came to the TIRR hospital, that person is still living today. So
Amazing.
that is remarkable. We have a whole cadre of people who had polio. Probably the largest cadre of people with polio in the United States are living right around the Gulf Coast area here because they were treated at TIRR and kept alive by TIRR over the years.
And I know in the last couple of decades, the patients have had experienced a whole new set of
Reoccurrence.
absolutely. Thank you.
I mean, that is exactly what the scientists have discovered, is that polio virus, when they thought it was dead,
It was harmless.
is just dormant, and it comes back to haunt people years after they thought they'd been cured. We have a lot to talk about. TIRR started, it was a polio hospital. What happens when they solve the polio problem? Dr. Spencer said, we have all these special people, we have this special place, let's start treating spinal cord injury and brain injury. That's how we got to where we are today. We're going to take a short break. Thank you all for watching Focus on Abilities. Stay tuned, it's a great conversation. We'll be right back. This is Focus on Abilities, your favorite program, I hope. I'm Lex Frieden, and Lourdes Cuéllar is here, our guest today. Lou, you've been at TIRR for a long, long time. So have I. I was a patient here in 1968, broke my neck in 67, came here in 68. One of the fondest memories I have is when I was just a week after I had been admitted to the hospital. I was in the therapy room, and at that time they had all the patients get on these flat boards that they would raise up. And the idea was that if you were going to be paralyzed, you needed to still know how to stand, because it helped your heart and lungs and everything like that. And so they'd strap you to these boards, and they'd stand the board up, and you'd be standing. And at some point, we had all the patients lined up around the outside of this gymnasium on these boards, and the therapists were there taking their blood pressure, make sure they didn't pass out, because after you've laid down for a few weeks and then you begin to sit up, it's kind of hard. So we're all, person comes in the door of the gymnasium, and the therapist leans over to me and she says, that's Dr. Spencer. He founded the place, and he's the CEO. He's the head of the whole thing. And I said, wow, that's cool. He checks on the patient. He walks through the hospital every day. She said, but he's going to know who you are. And I said, no, he's not going to know me. I've just been here for a week, and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him. Well, Dr. Spencer comes around. He stops at everybody's board table and speaks to them and speaks to the staff. And so he comes over to me. He says, how are you doing, Lex? And I'm like, what is the name? Is my name sticking on this board somewhere? How does the man know? And he carried on and asked me about my sister, asked me about, going back to school, and I thought about that. I mean, I couldn't think about anything. I just broke my neck, a month ago. And he's carrying on this conversation, and I'm bewildered. And he walks on down to the next table and so on, having these conversations. And I said to that therapist, I remember, I said to her, how in the world does he know my name and all these people and things about us? And she said, he has an incredible memory, an amazing mind, and don't ever underestimate what Dr. Spencer's going to think of. Well, sure enough, that has proved to be true here. One of the things that Spencer thought about shortly after that, in the late 60s, we had astronauts that were ready to go to the moon, and Dr. Spencer said, these guys in weightless conditions are not going to know how to behave any more than these patients who are accustomed to walking, and now they have to live in a wheelchair. And he said, let's train them. And
I remember those.
and he put, you remember that? We hung the astronauts from the ceiling. We literally put up straps on the ceiling that would hold the astronauts, kind of the opposite of being on the stand-up table, the tilt board, took them and hung them in this so-called weightless condition for hours. And that was,
In the therapy gym.
Wish we had some photographs of that. I've looked and I can't find any photographs of that, but that was an amazing kind of thing. And a lot of invention has happened at TIRR like that. A lot of invention.
You know, first of all, we talked about Dr. Harrington, the Harrington rods.
Right.
You know, and what it did for folks with scoliosis, the first phrenic stimulator here. More recently, you know, I'm thinking of the implantable pump for spasticity for patients, where you use very, very minute doses that are injected into the interthecal space and have helped patients go back to work. Has really helped with their spasticity.
Well,
the use of the toxins.
The toxins are
amazing to see. You know, when someone is so much, there's so much tone and they're so constricted, and to see that relaxation.
Well, some of the Botox was used here for therapeutic purposes years before they ever used it for cosmetic purposes.
Same thing with Leorisol, you know, or baclofen. You know, we were one of the first places to use that. More recently, I think, and certainly very exciting, is that exoskeletons, and right. Much of the work that is being done by all our researchers here. I mean, it's phenomenal when you walk up to the third floor in this building and just walk around and see some of the research that's going on.
Another is a person affected Spencer's personality. He would go to these international meetings of doctors and scientists and so on, and he would meet these remarkable people from around the world. And we had one of the preeminent orthotists in the world, Torkel Ingen, whom he met, I believe, at a meeting in the Netherlands, and said to the man, "I want you to come to Houston and work at my hospital." And he's like, "I have a family and I have a practice here, and this is where I grew up." And Ingen, as a matter of fact, when he was a child, was a spy for the Allies during the occupation. He, as a 14-year-old kid, I remember him talking to me about this. He would ride on the trains, and the Nazis didn't suspect him because he's just a kid, a tow-headed kid. He would carry these messages all over Europe on the trains because he was a kid. But he was a remarkable person who had many patents and inventions. He was the first orthotist to produce a arm and hand orthosis that was colored according to the skin of the patient. He thought it was rude to have people who had dark skin and light skin and all different color skins wearing these crappy silver braces. And he said, you know, we can do better than that. So he invented a material, a plastic that could be fashioned as an orthotic material that looked like the skin color of the person who was using the orthosis.
And, you know, I take that one step further. I remember after the Iraqi war, and we treated some of the Iraqi folks that had been injured, but not only skin colored, but culturally appropriate. Some of the orthotic devices that were made for some of the patients, for example, more hand-like, where they're more metal and
yeah.
Yes, I don't know the exact terminology, but that would not have been appropriate in their culture. So we work with the patient, and when I talk about culture, we take into account things such as that nature.
Right.
Same thing with nutrition, same thing with religion. We take all those things into the care of the patient. Right. We're very fortunate to have had a chaplain on staff, a wonderful psychology, social work department.
I mean, who would think that a little hospital with 100 patients would have a chaplain, a nutritionist, an elite pharmacist, an orthotist, engineers, robotics engineers? It goes on and on. One experiment that was done on me when I was a patient just shows how far ahead we were or how far behind, depending on the way you look at it. I had radioactive isotopes injected in me. And this is when they were trying to figure out, is there any value to using these radioactive isotopes in a human being? I was a volunteer subject. The scientist from Baylor College of Medicine was doing this with patients at the VA hospital and came here to TIRR and sought volunteers. And I volunteered mainly because the guy paid $50 to do this experiment. And I needed the $50 to buy popcorn and candy bars. So I volunteered to do the experiment. Now it turns out years later that that probably was a dangerous thing to do. They wouldn't be able to do it today. An IRB, an Institutional Review Board, would never approve that research today. Fortunately, they didn't put enough in me to harm me, but I did get a lot of candy bars and a lot of extra x-rays for that, because they were doing studies of where all that radioactive material was going to after they injected it in my arm. All kinds of far out stuff that you wouldn't find anywhere else. We had one engineer who was nominated for international award for the Robin Heron. Remember that? Robin Heron designed the first machine to measure human movement and to digitize and classify each movement that the human made. And all of that research has been used in the space program as well. Who was the doctor that created the centrifuge for people? This was Carlos, I don't think it was Dr. Valbona. I'll think of his name, but he came.
Cardura?
That's the one. The astronauts were having a problem maintaining their the blood pressure when they were in the space station. So he created a centrifuge for people. A great big merry-go-round looking thing where the astronauts would lay on this with their feet down and their head up at the top, and they would spin this thing so slowly, but it would replicate what it was like out in space where the blood all settled toward the feet. And it helped to condition the astronauts to be able to deal with that and their bodies to adjust to it while they were in space.
And I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I think a lot of people don't know that the collaboration that Dr. Spencer did with NASA and all the studies that were actually done here at TIRR, or TIRR partners were part of the process. I don't want to lose the thought you had earlier about the international aspect, because one of the things I'm so happy about is that our current medical director has reinitiated that. I think they've done the second international researchers meeting, and it's wonderful to get the think tanks from around the world looking towards innovation in this area, and it can only benefit not only us here but all people around the world. And so that's very, very exciting, to know as well.
Well, I want to talk, Luz, just a little bit about the patient experience and the impact that we've had on more than 10,000, probably more than 20,000 patients who've been hospitalized here for more than a week over the years, and we'll do that in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Focus on Abilities on HTV. I'm Lex Frieden. We'll be right back. This is Focus on Abilities. We're here today with Lourdes Cuéllar at TIRR. Lou, the patients that we've had in this hospital over the years leave better than they were when they came. I think you can say that without question.
You know, I tell people you see miracles every day. If I can share one short story, we used to have pediatric children, and I always remember this. Our old pharmacy used to be where there's a waiting room downstairs right now. And we had at that time a patient who was a quadruple amputee. And at the same time, we had a little girl, 2.5 years old, who had climbed up on a transformer, had lost both her arms. And they were both in therapy, and the gentleman was learning to walk, get his gait, and was on at that time what we call stubbies, and going along the hallway, and the little girl was walking next to him. And I heard her talking. I was standing at the door and was saying hi, and she said, don't worry, I'll just use the name John, if you start to fall, I'll catch you. And you know, here's a child with no arms, and you're sitting there thinking, are you going to run in front of him? But just the thought of the caring of this 2.5-year-old talking to this gentleman, and they were encouraging one another.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful story, and they did not allow what had happened to them to slow them down. And the little girl, you know, she actually's been seen on ABC and other channels. She's now a mother and has children, does everything with her feet.
Yeah.
And she learned to do everything with her feet here at TIRR by one of our occupational therapists.
Yeah. No, I mean, people just cannot imagine. First of all, I don't think you can imagine what the human spirit is capable of until you really test that spirit. And not everybody, I think, survives well. But the majority of the patients who come through here see they're treated in a way, they are inspired themselves, and they become inspirations. I don't like to use that word lightly, but I do say that people who have experienced certain barriers, challenges in their lives, often are stronger when they leave that. People have had life-changing experiences here. My life changed 180 degrees. I came here, I was going to be an engineer. I left here, and what
You're
am
a
I doing
professor.
today? I'm teaching biomedical informatics. Who would have thought of that?
But you know, it's interesting because Viktor Frankl actually wrote a book on that, life search for meaning or meaning of life, and specifically what was within a person who was able to survive the Nazis and the Auschwitz and through all the horrific horrors of the concentration camps. And it's just something within that person that is able to overcome and stay positive. And you see the same thing in many of our patients.
The other thing is,
life search for meaning.
I'm not sure that we all appreciate how resilient our bodies are, because the body can be pretty badly beaten up. And if you want to survive and you have the right treatment, you will survive. And now we have more modern approaches to orthotics and to robotics and to treatment that enable people to retain more of their pre-injury, pre-illness capabilities. But it's really not relevant. It's more about what you want to do, what you cause yourself to do through your own initiative, your own imagination, and by capturing the love and
support of family.
The caring of others. Yeah, it's a support of your family, whether that's your immediate family, whether it's your extended family, whether it's the family that you adopt while you're a patient in the hospital. It all has a positive impact in the end. Lou, this has been a revealing. It has been a fulfilling conversation for me, and I hope for our guests today, and I want to thank you for being with us today. Focus on Ability is a program a lot of people watch, and I think a lot of people will appreciate your contribution.
It's been a pleasure, and it's really been great to reminisce. It's a great place.
Well, we've had the opportunity to talk about TIRR's history, and there's more of that we haven't had the opportunity to discuss today, and maybe we'll do that again at some point in the future. I want to thank all of you for watching Focus on Abilities. This program is important to me. I think it's important to many of those who watch the program. I want to thank HTV for producing it. They've been doing it for quite a number of years, since 1991. And we've put together some good interviews. This has been a special one. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, for watching the program, and I hope you'll tune in next time. I'm Lex Frieden. Have a great day.